many years, stories have been passed along at the domino table. Fun stories, sad stories, true stories, gossip, drama, ponchinche, you name it. Hi, my name is Edwin Desamour, and welcome to Domino Dialogues, where here we set the stage where the domino table is the stage. And today, I'm here with two giants, Luis Lozada and Ray Collazo. It's an honor to have you here.
It's great to see you, man.
You know, it's kind of funny you call me a giant. That made me feel real good because, you know, I'm only 5'5". Right?
Listen, you guys
You're the
are
Kevin
giants,
Hart of this table, brother.
So this is our first episode, so please bear with me because I'm gonna be honest, I'm kind of in awe. I'm a fan, just to be in your presence, and I just can't wait to get the story out and have you guys share your story. So basically, I've been reading a little bit on your background. You both are not originally from Philadelphia, so if you don't mind, Luis, let us know where we started at.
Well, I first arrived in Philadelphia in 1969. I hadn't decided until my junior year of high school that I wanted to go to college. A desire which presented problems for me because I had six surviving siblings, and college was not a cheap proposition. And so in New York, I became part of a program called Project Upward Bound. It's one of those social programs proffered by the federal government that are intended to do good and which did a lot of good. The idea was kids who had the talent and the ability and the intelligence to get into college, but maybe didn't have the financial wherewithal, or maybe needed some remedial help in some areas. And what they did is they basically helped you. They gave you the remediation. They helped you find money. They helped you get into the colleges that you wanted to go to. Among those universities and colleges was Temple University. I had lived in a project apartment with 9 people, total 9 people.
Where in New York?
We're in New York and Queens mostly. I was born on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in a tenement, right? And the tenement was the home for rich people at one time. And it got broken down to accommodate people who needed housing. And in our case, that meant what was once somebody's bedroom was our apartment. And I had the oldest girl of my siblings, Nellie, died very young, but she was the first sibling I knew. I'm the only one of my siblings who knew her. So it was my parents, Nellie, and me. And my mother would keep the milk cold on the windowsill and bathe us in a double sink. And we shared a toilet with everybody else on that floor.
Amazing, amazing.
So what happened is...
So you learned how to tap dance if you had to share the
You had to tap dance all through life. And so as we climbed the social ladder, we went from the tenements. My father applied for a project apartment. And I'd never seen my father as happy as the day they told him we had gotten one, because the projects had been created for the soldiers returning from World War II. And then for lower income families got in the queue. And this is when the government actually responded to the needs of people. So we moved from Manhattan to Queens, where I did most of my growing up. And in 1969, well, it was time to go to college. And I came to Temple. I'd never been alone in my life. And I arrived at the dorm before my...
Before you go there, why Philadelphia and why Temple?
Okay, a very practical reason. I felt in a way, having shared those apartments with my family, that I was abandoning them. Because the chaos of so many people in one place, and then you're in the projects, where everybody is your parent, everybody is either your friend or maybe not your friend. I felt guilty. Man, I'm leaving them behind to go get an education. But my father would not have it any other way. A man who had been taken out of school in the 3rd grade. Tú vas a tener éxito en esta vida. You're going to succeed. You're going to do it for all of us. And unfortunately for me, he wanted me to be a doctor, a lawyer, an Indian chief. I wanted to be a photojournalist. And it was also his fault. So I chose Temple because it was only an hour and a half away from New York. So if I ever needed to come back, it would be easy. A train ticket then was what, like $3.75. I could jump on Amtrak or on Greyhound. And it was essentially, comparatively speaking, 2 cents to travel back and forth. It was money then, but of course, you know.
So we have actually 2 New Yorkers at the table. So interesting is that you guys never met each other in New York, but you met each other in Philly. So tell me a little bit about your journey from New York to
Well, let me
Philadelphia.
say that I was born in Puerto Rico, Humacao, Puerto Rico, and I'm very proud of that because it makes me a real Rican. You know what I'm saying? Um, we came to New York City. I often say that my parents must have been real patriotic. We moved the 4th of July, 1956. And I remember telling my mother, Mommy, vámonos para Puerto Rico. They're shooting guns out here. And she said, no, today's the 4th of July. So that's why I remember, because it was the 4th of July, 1956. It was the Bronx, 582 Beck Street in the South Bronx. And I didn't know any people that were European Americans. There was only one, and we're talking late 50s, okay? And he was homosexual. So the blacks and the Puerto Ricans, they treated him like he was really different. He was white and he was gay. So when I came to Philly, I thought they were minorities. I swear. I thought European Americans were minorities because I didn't know any, you know. Everybody was black and Puerto Rican, except the school teachers. But we didn't include them because we figured, you're a kid, you don't know where they came from. Where did these? But the only white person was that. So when I came to Philly, I often said, where all these foreigners come from? Not knowing I was the foreigner.
Amazing. So what was the culture like? You know, if you both don't mind chiming in there, like, what was the difference between Puerto Ricans in New York and Puerto Ricans in Philadelphia? Did you feel there was a shift change? Was it the same, or was it a little different? And was there any unity, or were you embraced once you got here? If anybody wants to jump in.
Well, contextually, there was a difference. I've always found PRs to be PRs wherever you go.
Yeah.
And the only differences are the differences that they have experienced from the dominant culture around them. Having said that, however, New York is the crucible that I will always be happy I was formed in. But folks in New York can be, although there are very many good and warm people, can be guarded. You know, they don't. When I got to Philly, somebody extended a hand to me and wanted to give me a hug, and they were meeting me for the first time. That might not happen in New York all the time. Of course, you might be in an environment where people would welcome you and things like that. But New York Puerto Ricans there was a level of New York sophistication. Philly was a little bit more of a parochial town, meaning all cities are cities of neighborhoods, but New York wasn't quite that. We lived in the project, we were from the projects, right? Or if you were from Manhattan. In Philly, even though people had various communities, they would greet you with a hug and a handshake. And it didn't only have to be Puerto Ricans, by the way, generally speaking. In New York, you were taxed for clothes and food and things like that. In Philly, you were not. Philly generally, as I remember, tended to be a little cleaner city, a much more walkable city, which is counterintuitive because everybody in New York walks. In fact, when I first got my first roommate in college, I would say, come on, let's walk down to City Hall. And he'd go like, are you crazy, man? Do you know how far that is? Or I would say, let's walk up to Connie Mack and catch the game, the Phillies game, because the Mets are in town. And at the 7th inning, you could go to Connie Mack Stadium and they let you in for free.
Right, that's right.
And you could see a game. And the New York Mets were making their run towards the World Series in '69, and they came through Philly. You know, Dick Allen just made the Hall of Fame. I actually saw him hit home runs at Connie Mack. But the environment was very, very warm here, uber warm, I thought.
Now, you mentioned Philly being clean. It's pretty interesting. Do you still see Philadelphia as being that clean city?
I remember it back then as being that. And as we know, the problems with abandoned cars and this trash strike more recently didn't help the generate thing. But by comparison, and remember, New York is a much, much bigger city. And the environments change from neighborhood to neighborhood. It depends on where you are. Like if you go we used to go to Times Square, my brother and my friends, to get in trouble in Times Square, But you could actually walk through Times Square and not have to step over somebody's body. You know, and in New York now, the problem with people who are disenfranchised and poor, and I'm no way denigrating those people. There are reasons for why that is occurring. New York, there were so many people in Times Square on the sidewalk that they had to create a line, another lane, sort of another sidewalk for the regular people to be able to walk down the street. And then you had the traffic. And I had never seen that before in New York. And we recently went to see a play, and I'm saying, holy man, how things have changed. And New York, by comparison now, is not the city, the clean city that it was then, that I remember not being as clean as what Philly struck me as.
Okay, and you mentioned when you got to Philly, so we could pass it off to Ray. What was that handshake like? You guys did a handshake earlier. Can I see that handshake between you guys?
It was, you know what it was? And then, come here, man.
Yeah,
Give me a
yeah,
hug.
you got a hug,
Like
man.
that, you know. Don't ask old guys to reach across the
Yeah,
table.
please.
All right. But it was always genuine and warm. People were generally glad to meet you, and they would talk to you, and you formed friendships with people you had heretofore not known. And those friendships, we recently lost one of our dear friends, Danny Rodriguez, who was himself a pillar in the community. And it was a reunion of everybody who was young and robust and embarking on their lives and their careers and their educations and their life experience. And you know what? The hugs were as warm as not more fierce. And man, you still look good. I said, well, you're blind.
You know, one of the things that he brought up, and I just thought about it, we were at this funeral, and it dawned on me that I only see these people at funerals. Can we do something here to bring all these old timers together and enjoy ourselves instead of meeting at funerals, man?
No, we can. And matter of fact, since we're on this topic right now, what was your journey, and how did that feel? What was the difference to you? Was there a culture shock? Right.
Absolutely. First of all, I've always been proud of being Collazo. In New York, it's Collazo. Carajo, we're Puerto Ricans. And they still, I go to New York, hey, Collazo. No, yo soy Collazo, you know? And I know that at some point I went on black radio and they wanted to change my name. I said, Collazo, Collazo. No, it's Collazo. Change your name, do something else. No, Collazo. And I stuck to my guns. In New York, I'm Collazo. I had to beat them up. Puerto Ricans will call you Collazo.
But you know, Ray, that's part of the Puerto Rican experience because I was Lozada, Lozado, Lozada, and like you had to remind people all the time, no, it's Lozada, three syllables.
So
Yeah.
I'm noticing something right now. This is pretty interesting for me. You know, it's about identity, right? Get my name correct. Don't change my name. And you know, what is it about that? Why did that mean? Why does it mean so much now? Why did it mean so much to you back then of getting that name right?
You know what? It's about the ancestors. Do you call somebody O'Brien or do you call them O'Brien? It was the way the name was supposed to be said, pronounced. And it's so much a part of our identity because we belong to our parents and their parents. And you honor them when you say the name properly.
But you know, one of the things, I'm speaking in reference to Puerto Ricans. They have been there so many more generations than we in Philly. So they tend to have lost some of their heritage. You know, where in Philly, we have 70, 80 years. In New York, they have 110 years. So they have generations where they've lost the language and some of the culture. And also, I don't know any Puerto Rican community in anywhere in this country where all the neighborhoods are at least 30% African American. So we tend to take on some of their traits. And African Americans have a difficult time saying Collazo. So they say Collazo. We eat collard greens. You
It's
know.
an interesting perspective. I mean, to
No,
hear
it's the
it that
truth.
way. No,
I've been to
it's good.
Milwaukee.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been to Chicago. I've been, and every Puerto Rican neighborhood has at least 30% black. Look at Philly. But you can't say that the other way around.
I have a question that's not even scripted, right? You know, when was your first mata? Since we have matas at the table, when was your first mata? And you know, as a kid, for me, it was like, I'm gonna get me a mata at the store, right? And you crack it open, and it was this cool thing to have a mata. When was your first mata?
Well, go ahead. Let Ray go first on this one.
You know what? It's funny because I was having this conversation yesterday on the phone. Some girl said, "Hace tiempo que no bebo malta," and I said, "It's been." I can't remember the last time I drank a malta, but as a kid, I remember putting eggs in it. Do you remember that?
Yep, I do. We put eggs in everything, man.
Put eggs in
Eggs
mata.
in the malta,
Okay,
and it was like a milkshake.
really?
Yeah.
Well, we need the young folks
Right?
to hear. We need the young folks to listen to this. Put eggs in mata.
Yes, and you batter it, and it tasted really great.
Well,
I haven't had it in 70 years, but
But that was your way of making a milkshake.
that's what our parents
or
would
Slurpee
do.
or a mata Slurpee.
You know, I didn't know my parents. That's how they made it because they had been taught that.
You know, both funny because he said that Puerto Ricans put eggs in everything. My mother would skip the malta and put it directly a raw egg, castor oil, followed by a raw egg.
Oh yeah, I remember that too.
Mom, what are you crazy? You know, and you know, and now what we know everything about consuming raw eggs, we should have been dead like a long time ago.
No doubt, no
You know?
doubt.
And, but you're right. They put the egg in the malta, and the
And it
thing
was
with malta,
tasty. And it was tasty.
That's
I
a
remember
famous
it
Mata
being
story
very,
right now.
Very
Exclusive
very
right here at the Domino Dialogues.
yeah, no, there'll be a lot of people who would tell you the same.
Yeah, no, people our age would know that.
Yeah,
They would know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. You know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to commit sacrilege because when I got my first malta, I think I may have been 6 or 7, and the flavor didn't resonate with me.
No,
Right? It's like my mother would give us berenjena, right? Eggplant.
Yeah.
And I would never eat it. And she said, "Mira, muchacho, cómete la berenjena." And I'd tell her in English, right? I said, "Ma, everybody knows that eggs don't come from plants, right? They come from the ass of chickens." I would tell her. And so she would want you to eat the eggplant. And it just wasn't. I love it now, but then, and so Malta has grown on me over the years, and I do like it now. You see?
Well, I'll give a true story before we proceed. And this was this morning, because you know usually when I get angry, I have this thing with myself where I got to process what made me angry, what triggered me, right? And just a habit I do now. So Abigail reached out and said, "Hey, can you pick up a 6-pack of Malta so we could do the show?" And I was like, "Sure, no problem." So now I'm coming from like close to the outskirts of Huntington Valley out there. So I stopped into a supermarket, I was like, "Hey, where can I find some Malta?" And they're looking at me like, "What are you talking about?"
But you should know better, man.
Right? And I should know better, right? But then I'm like getting frustrated because that person doesn't know what Malta is, and I'm not understanding that just yet. So I'm reaching out to Abigail and I'm saying, "Hey, I'm having a hard time getting it." She was like, "It's in the ethnic aisle." I was like, "An ethnic aisle?" I'm like, okay, so I'm asking for the ethnic aisle. So I'm going down to the ethnic aisle and it was like Asian food and a couple other things and I didn't see any matas. And I'm starting to get a little frustrated because every time I try to talk to someone, I'm looking for malta and some of them are like, "What?" And I find myself, and I called Abigail and I apologize because I was a little stressed out. I was like, "You know what, I'll throw the towel in." Because I let something just ruin my whole day, right? And then when I was about to walk out, there was a Puerto Rican guy, old head, he was doing security there. And I'm walking out and he overheard me. He says, "What you said you were looking for?" I said, "Malta." He goes, "Oh man," he goes, "right over there. It's under the second shelf." Like he knew exactly what I was talking about. But on the way down, I was frustrated because as a kid, I grew up, I knew what a malta was. I could just go to the store and grab a malta out the freezer. And I was thinking, or out the refrigerator, but I was, in my mind, I was assuming that everyone else understood.
But you know what's funny about that point is, you know what you never find in the international aisle? Spaghetti sauce. You get my point?
Yeah.
Right? It's Italian, right? But we're the current kid on the block. And I'll tell you, when I was a kid, there was never an international aisle. So
No,
if you wanted to
I've
buy,
never seen one.
right? No, well, this
Till
is the
today.
deal. You asked me about the difference between New York and Philly. Well, in New York, though we were a minority, we were less of a minority. When you came to Philly, it was a bigger minority.
Bigger
So the
minority,
things like
absolutely.
malta or gandules being like just with the beans instead of the international. So I was in the international in Philly, then I went home to New York, and the international aisle in New York was like 3 aisles. You know what I'm saying? Because
There was so
everybody was
in New
represented
York, yeah.
in the international
And
aisle.
this is an acquired taste, man. You give this to anybody Puerto Rican, they're not gonna like it.
Yeah, I've
This
seen that
beer
before.
went sour. I've actually heard
I've
that.
seen that before.
And, but the thing is, it really grew on me. And you go to my house, you'll always find it in the refrigerator. And we enjoy it. And it was, but at one time it was as foreign to me, but everybody was PR. We talk about the egg thing in the malta. We did that too. And then my mother every once in a while throw some vanilla in there, something.
Yeah, también.
Well, no, this is amazing. This is good stuff that we're capturing. And Ray, I have a question. I have many questions for you. What made you get into radio? What made you get into media?
Well, this is an interesting story that I've told many times. When television was affordable in the Bronx, it was a big deal. Wow, televisión, Ed Sullivan on Sunday nights. And then you put the green screen on it so you could say you had color TV. And my sister was 7 years older. So when I'm 7, she's 14. And I'm always complaining, Mommy, I'm tired of seeing these soap operas. And I was always pissed off because I had to see Jesse in General Hospital sleep with another dude every other week. And then there was one soap opera after another, and I was always complaining. So one day, Mom, God rest her soul, said, Papi, ven para la cocina. I go to the kitchen, and she gives me what I thought was a wrapped up cards to play because it was shaped like it. I opened it up and it's an AM transistor radio. Back in those days, there was no FM, and it came with one little white headphone. And she said, Papito, from today on, your sister runs television and you run the radio. I said, oh, shit. And I run the radio. So from that moment on, I knew that I was going to be a radio announcer. Even though she didn't mean it that way. She's just trying to stop the war between my sister and I. But I took it, if my mother says, this is my mother. So from that moment on, I took that AM radio and started listening to WABC, Cousin Brucey, and WWRL, because it was all AM. In fact, when I started radio, I was the first FM Latino in Philly, because the Latinos in 1970, I started October 20th, 1970.
Let me
And
pause you right there. I just want to say something. That right there is a copy cool. That statement right there is a copy cool. And I just want to put that out there and give you your props for that, man, because being a pioneer, and this is why we call you a giant, because that was just amazing right there. And I just want to pause on that, and I want listeners to understand that, being one of the first states a lot because you paved the way for many. So apologize for interrupting that.
Not one of the first, the first.
The first. No, I'm stand corrected.
Yeah, I mean Latinos, because when I went on, we had Radio Borinquen, and it was 860 AM. Then Camden had, on top of the 6th floor in Camden City Hall was WCAM, which is now WJZ. And they had 2 hours at night over there and 6 hours over here. Well, it was sun up and sun down, WTEL, on Oyo Road and Hunting Park. And that was AM. And they played no salsa. They played a Gran Combo and Willie Colon. No Ray Barreto, no Johnny Pacheco. they play, you know, música jíbara or classic singers from Puerto Rico. Then I go on. I remember my buddies, I used to walk around. I was annoying as hell, okay? Because I used to record pretending to be a radio announcer all time, all day, all night at home. Da, 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 on my tape. Then when I go see my boys, I bring the tape. And that's what we'd listen to. So the day I was on the radio for the first time, nobody knew what an FM radio was. So Louis Morales, who we saw the other day at the funeral,
Who also is known as Worm.
and the first Puerto Rican I ever met in Philly, by the way, he went out and bought an adapter and listened to the show. They all jumped in one car, 6 friends, and listened to the show. I'm all excited because I knew they were listening. Next time I saw him, I said, "How was it?" He said, "Man, we've been listening to your junk for years with your damn transistors, the same thing." And I said, "Wow, that's something. I'm expecting them to be as excited as I am." And they're saying, "No, man, we got time. We've been listening to this junk for years, and you keep annoying us with these tapes."
Question: do you feel as though when you entered the industry, were you stereotyped, and if you were, did you have to overcome that?
Well, let me say this. I'd like to start with the fact that I was a graffiti artist, one of the first graffiti artists in the world. And my name was King Dip, D-I-P with a crown, because I used to walk like this
With a dip.
and a 10-gallon hat, all right? Not that I was influenced by the African-American community, you know what I mean? So one day I'm walking, I remember on East Cambria Street, and a black brother says, "You know, you're the king of the dips, bro." And I said, "Oh." So as a kid, as a high schooler, I would call Georgie Woods the man with the goods on DAS AM, and a guy named, I can't think of him right now. And I just told you his name a few.
And I'm trying to remember.
Anyway, on WHAT AM. So then I would get my little transistor the mom gave me years ago and get on the bus, because there was no FM back then. And I'd get on the bus, and for 2 years, 5 days a week, Georgie Woods would say, "King Dip is on his way to Alney High School." Then I'd change it on the bus, and WHAT would say, "King Dip is on his way to high school." So when I got to the school, I was the man. "Bro, how you get your name on the radio every day?" So I became this King Dip. And that is what opened my career, because one day I decided I was old enough to drive now, and I said, "Let me go to WDAS." So I pull up at DAS, and I try to get in thinking I'm King Dip. And the security said, "I don't care who you are, you can't come in here." And he throws me back out in the car. So then I said, "Wait a minute, it's 10 o'clock, Georgie's gonna be off, so the next car that pulls into the garage must be Soul Finger, Donnie Brooks. He's the 10 o'clock guy." So I get out the car. I just told you the story. I get out the car.
I'm enjoying it the second time.
Yeah, I get out the car, and I said, "That must be Soul Finger." So I walk up to him, and he's a little afraid, you know. "What do you want?" I said, "You're Soul Finger, aren't you?" "Yeah." I said, "Listen, I'm King Dip." And he starts to laugh. The hell do I got something on my face? And he's laughing. He said, "You're King Dip? Are you serious?" I said, "Yeah." So he tries to take me in, and the security says, "No, he can't come in here." So he tells me, "Wait in the car," and he brings Georgie Woods out. And Georgie Woods was a civil rights guy. He was the man.
He was huge. He was used in the Philly music scene and radio scene.
And an activist, you know, a
activist,
big time
right.
activist. I met Martin Luther King, by the way. That's another story. With Georgie Woods. So Georgie comes out. I'm the only person in this lot, okay? And he says to Soul Finger, "Where the hell is he?" And I'm standing right there. And Soul Finger starts laughing. And I said, "What the hell is he laughing about?" He said, "That's him." And Georgie says, "What the hell are you, a white boy?" This changed my life. I said, "I'm Puerto Rican." And he said, "I'm from Spanish Harlem. I love Puerto Ricans." And from that day on, I was able to go to DAS anytime I wanted to, sit there and watch the DJs do their thing. They would let me talk once in a while. And one day, Georgie Woods told me this, and I thought he was lying. He told me, Tito Puente made a song called the Georgie Woods Mambo, because Georgie was a radio announcer in New York before he came here. And I thought he was just pulling my leg. The day of his funeral, I come from the funeral of Georgie's funeral, and there's this new thing called YouTube. I said, Georgie Woods Mambo, damn it. It was there. Tito Puente had made a record called Tito Puente, Georgie Woods Mambo by Tito Puente. And all that time, but the fact that he loved Puerto Ricans changed my whole life. Because everywhere I went to the Uptown Theater 100 times and never went through the front door. I always went through the back door. I met Michael. This is a long story. I'm with Georgie Woods. Everywhere I go, I'm his Puerto Rican. He introduced me. This is my Puerto Rican son. And he picks me up one day at my mother's house at 9th and Erie. And he says, "Come with me. We're going to go to Joe Frazier's victory party," because he knocked out Jerry Quarry. And it was at Broad and Vine Hotel Philadelphia. And I'm there, you know. Joe Frazier had a group called Joe Frazier and the Knockouts. He couldn't sing worth a lick, but he had a heck of a band. And Georgie was he was kind of arrogant, you know. He pushed the drummer out and started drumming. He didn't know what he was doing, but that's Georgie. Nobody would say anything to him. But on the way up Broad Street, he's telling me, "Diana Ross done sent these bunch of kids. They sound like girls. They're never going to get anywhere." And I got it in my head, these little boys are terrible. So when we pull up, these 5 little boys are there. They had just come off the stage at the Uptown Theater. And Georgie's had a few drinks. And he's arrogant anyway. And he starts yelling at them, "You guys ain't going nowhere. You sound like little girls." And the youngest one starts to cry. And I say, "Georgie, you shouldn't do that." I went over and I hugged him. And I said, "Son, Mr. Woods has had a little too much to drink." And he didn't mean all that. And he said, "Thank you." That was Michael Jackson. He was 10 years old. He wasn't famous. They weren't famous. And that was my one encounter with Michael Jackson.
And they'd come to Philly to perform too. I remember that time period and that time frame of which you speak.
Yeah, because they would come to the Uptown first, and then they would go to the Apollo.
They'd open up their shows at the Uptown so that they could break them out.
With all these experiences, a couple questions for both of you in the industry, right? Many things were going on, especially when it comes to racism. What was your experience like? When you first had to really feel it here in Philadelphia, but also in your careers, right? How did your career, or how did that influence your photography, your writing, your storytelling? How did that influence the music you played? If you knew the community was hurting because there was something tragic that happened to the Puerto Rican community, if you have any of those, can you share that?
It's sort of, for me, it's really interesting because I have generally, from my time that I came to Philly, found general acceptance as an individual. But I also would walk through Kensington when I didn't know what Kensington represented in those days. And Ray, you know what I'm talking about. And if you walk through Kensington as a Latino or an African-American male, you ran the risk of being stoned even. People would throw rocks at you, ask you what you were doing in town.
Have you heard of the Kensington Stomp?
Not particularly, but I may know where you're going.
There was something where they would knock, either you were, Latino or black, they would knock you out, put your head on the curve, open up your mouth,
Oh, yes.
and kick the back of your head to knock your teeth out.
I
Yeah,
actually
I've heard
saw that
that.
depicted in a movie.
Yeah.
I've heard of that.
But what happened, generally speaking, remember, I came in '69. Civil rights was in full flower and really moving along. A lot of adaptations were being made. And I'll give you a perfect example. Temple University accepted me. And then when we got there, I met up with a few Puerto Ricans, a few Latinos that were at Temple University. Now, at the time, as I remember, Temple University was a school of 40,000 students. You know how many Latinos I met that first year? 15. And they had come together to form the Federation of Puerto Rican Students. And we had a guy named Juan Torres who became like the first president. I became the second one in my second year there. And what we had determined that we needed to come together, because the guy who founded Temple University is a guy named Russell Conwell. You know, the Baptist Temple on Broad Street?
Right.
He was the first, he established that. And he went on to write a book or put together a collection of his essays called Acres of Diamonds, in which he posited that, we tend to travel the world. We go into the world seeking our respective fortunes and our notoriety and making money. And we go to all these far-flung places to find it, but we never look at the acres of diamonds in our backyard. Now, here we were in the School of Middle, ensconced, the university ensconced in the middle of North Philadelphia, and overwhelmingly a white school with some foreign students and a minimum of us. And that's both African American and Puerto Rican, and a rising, ensconced in a community that was largely Afro American and Latino. So we went on to decide that we're going to do something about this. We're going to demand that the university open up its doors to the acres of diamonds in its own backyard. Right?
It's poetry, man. I love it.
And this has had that unfolded. We were the Federation of Puerto Rican Students, and the African American students formed the Black United Front, and we coalesced. And there's some legends that you should have on this show who were pioneers even before me. These are the guys who set up the thing for him. But we came together and we decided how we were going to proceed, formed the Federation. We even got a little space in the student activities building that the university granted. But when we told them, hey, we want you to open up these doors to us. You're right here in our neighborhood, and we're not here in the school. And initially they said, But we had people like Ray Collazo, Nelson Diaz, Juan Torres, people who had come from Puerto Rico who were now studying at Temple Universities, and those dummies that came from New York City like me, right, that were studying. And we said, yeah, we're going to do something. And we started to make noise. And as our numbers increased, begrudgingly they increased. We even had a member of the Puerto Rican student that was a Jewish white boy, a trumpeter, and he loved to play salsa, Latin jazz. His name was Jeff.
Does that federation still exist?
I don't know that it does. I suspect that in some form it might, because eventually it ultimately expanded to include all Latinos, not just Puerto Ricans by name. Okay. But we would have a couple of brothers, African brothers who came around. And you know why? It was a very political reason. We had good-looking women.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Well, here's my question on that, because young folks are going to be watching this, right? And young college students. If this federation still exists, right? If this movement is still happening, do they know their own history, right?
It was an evolution. The federation started like this and then started to become like this. But then this is what happened. We met with success, right? We would have rallies. There was a shooting in one of the universities down south where some people of color and not had been shot. And we decided we were going to have a demonstration in support of those students, protesting what had happened to them. This is, I don't know if you were at that rally at Lamont Steptoe, who was one of our affiliate brothers, African-American brothers, cut down the flag at Temple's campus, and all the security descended on him. And then I jumped on the security, and then my Nilsa, who is now my wife, jumped on the security to separate me, and it became this thing. But then we started to gain momentum with the administration. And then, they really resisted the idea of open admissions. And at one meeting, I said, you guys, the founder of the schools, Russell Conwell, wrote a book about reaping the benefits of their diamonds in our own background, the acres of diamonds in our own backyard. And now you're telling us that we're not diamonds, that we don't qualify, we're not worthy to be at this school. And I'm not saying it was because I said that, because we said that collectively. And the school began to respond. And little by little, you saw a change, and the numbers started to increase. And they developed a policy where they flung the doors open, begrudgingly at first, but eventually they did. And it was one of the proudest things that I have ever been part of.
With your work, with your writings and your photography, did you find yourself capturing these moments of
Oh, sure, in one way or another. And we had a lot of creative people who contributed in artistic ways, performance-wise, things that they wrote. I was always taking pictures, and there are plenty of pictures that many people took of those early demonstrations and protests.
what is the importance of that? What is the importance of capturing these moments through art and pictures? Why is that so important?
We can never forget. Look where we find ourselves today. People who are longstanding citizens of this country, and I'm not talking about recent arrivals, but people who have been here along those recent arrivals are now people, they want to kick them out of the country. We have long established the franchise that gives us the citizenship of this country. We paid our dues, just like the Italians before us, just like the Germans before us, just like the Jews are Irish before us. There is a place in Lower Merion, right, called Duffy's Court, right, in Ballackinwood, basically. Duffy's Court was where they started the main line. The main line is because of the train that they established. Irish people who had come before other Irish people, right, became workers. There was a time when an Irish immigrant was considered lower than an African-American slave. And what happened at Duffy's Court, the guy who had come first and now was a foreman for the guy building the railroad, hey, I can bring people from Ireland that'll come here and work and cheap. And they would come to escape things like the potato famine and things like that with their families, wives and children. And they would have these camps right along where the tracks are going to. Duffy's Cut was one such place. This is what happens. Came time to pay those workers once the tracks were laid. And right, all of a sudden, they all contracted yellow fever or whatever the particular disease was at the time. Well, fast forward a century or so later, and those graves got dug up. And guess what they found? People with crushed skulls, bullet holes in their heads, in a mass grave. My point is this, everybody suffers that same indignity. But what happened when we did our thing was all of a sudden the doors opened up a little bit more. And that was the wellspring of where many of us find ourselves today, because we were able to pursue our education. I went on to go to law school for half a minute. My father's idea of my success was that I become an attorney. I wanted to be a photojournalist. And that created everything. But I was able to get into law school after all of that. And get this, I was accepted in law school before I had finished all of my credits. I had one more class to take that summer before I went to law school. And they had accepted me. Years later, they didn't want to give me a degree because they said, oh, wait a minute, you didn't finish. They didn't have a record of my finishing all my credit, but they accepted me into law school. You follow me? And then I had to remind him. And all these professors came to my rescue and said, no, he finished everything. And we accepted him in law school. How are you going to fight that one?
Thank you for even sharing that. I have a
But you understand my point
No,
about the progression that began with those first 15.
Yeah, no, it brought it back full
And you
circle.
cannot forget.
You can't, and
you have to document it.
And I think it's very important for even for younger viewers and everyone to understand that there's a reason. There's a reason for the show, right? There's a reason why they are putting this out there. Their documentary capturing Puerto Rican history, because you can't forget, right? Speaking to Abigail and Eric, they're so passionate about capturing history, right? And you speaking that and telling that story explains why it's so important, right? Because you can't forget, because these things will repeat itself. What was your first experience in Philadelphia dealing with racism? I mean,
well, the day
I'm from
moved,
West. I'm born and raised in Philadelphia. You know, I was born at Temple Hospital. You know, I'm 53 years old. Uh, I still remember those days where, you know, I couldn't cross, once I crossed Kensington or Front Street or trying to make it to Pedal Power or a bike shop on Girard. I remember those families coming out, calling us spics and the N-word and everything else, and you know, throwing bottles and sticks and spitting on us. But, you know, and that was not so long ago when you think about that. But what was your first experience?
I have two stories that I like to tell about racism in Philly. I moved to Philly in 1963. I didn't know what a spick was. We got an apartment, Marshall and Cambria. Try to imagine that being an all-white community, because it's all Puerto Rican now. And we wake up the next morning. I'm 10 years old. My sister was 17 and attractive, and a bunch of, I don't call them white boys, I call them Europeans, Americans. My sister comes out in her short pants and they want to grab her butt, and I'm this 10-year-old kid defending my sister. And they said, "You damn spicks." And I said, "What the hell is a spick?" I had no idea, none whatsoever. And I remember then we moved to Pelthorpe and York. And I remember as a kid in New York seeing pumps being open, and you know, you take the can and you spray it. So there was on Pelthorpe Street near my house. It was hot. So let me do like the big guys used to do in New York. So I'm spraying people, and the cops came. A 10-year-old boy, 11-year-old boy. They throw me in the cop car. I'm frightened to death. They drive me to the 26th district, which is east of Kensington Avenue. And we know what that's about. They pull up in front of the police station and they say, "Get out." I said, "Get out? Ain't you going to take me to the police?" "No, just get out." I said, "I don't know where I'm going." "You go that way." I'm frightened to death. I said, "No, can't you take me? I prefer you take me inside the police district." Their whole thing was they knew that by the time I got home, they will beat me up. And they did.
When I was a kid, friends of mine, they would take their shoes off and you had to make it home once they dropped you off somewhere. And they would take their shoes off, and you see some of my friends make it back home.
But I got beat up by young boys and their dads. And when I got home, my mother gave me a worse ass beating because she frightened. "Oh, the police took your son." But that proved to me the racism, because what they did is they brought this little Puerto Rican boy to get his ass kicked.
And you know what it was, Ray? Our parents were always about, well, what did you do to get yourself in that position?
No, por eso abriste la pompa.
Tú no le metiste un cocotazo a él. You know, you remember that
and then, you know, just...
What about your music, your talent, right? You know, he expressed about the reason through arts, capturing what's going on. How did it affect? Did it have any effect or impact on how you spoke and you know, MC'd? You know, did you, when there are certain things, did you feel when the community was under stress and you felt as though, let me relieve that stress? You know, do you had any moments like that?
Well, you know, to me, the heyday of Latin music, you know, the funniest days, I took bus loads of people on a monthly basis from Philly to New York to party. And I also made money. I went to the Yankee Stadium concert with the Fania All Stars. I took 3 buses and we partied hardy. And you made some money. I was the guy throwing the concerts and the dances in Philly, So my generation, I was the guy that put salsa on the map in Philly, basically. And even the guy that's there now, David Ortiz, is still there. He's been there 40 years, and yet you mention his name.
Hold on 1 second. Hold on. We got another copy cool moment here. He was the guy that what? Put salsa what?
On the map in Philly.
That's a copy cool moment.
Wait a minute. Did you just say David did?
No. David has been on since I left.
He contributed, obviously. He contributed. It's not to diminish.
No, but here's the story behind it. I get a call from a kid at the station in 1975, and he says, "Listen, my mom and dad wants me to invite you to the house." That's fine. I show up at this house. They owned a grocery store, Bodega, 7th and Thompson. They serve me el bistec. Here's this kid and his parents, and they say, "This is my son, David. He'd like to be a radio announcer at Temple." And I said, "Well, I'm graduating in a couple of months. Tell him to, go to Temple, and I'll talk to the program director." I left, and he's been there since 1976.
I have a request for both of you, if possible. And in the future, I would love to hopefully showcase some of your photography here. And this is a request. I would love for you to DJ this event. Bring many of our Puerto Rican photographers, showcase their artwork, invite the public out. If that's possible, I would love to work with Eric and Abigail on that. Have you DJing and bring that in. This conversation can go on forever.
Can I say one thing though before you asked before what the significance of all this. Ray doing that show and us making a little noise said that we're here. We're not going away. And the significance is Ray did the music and then he finds out that there's this young journalism student in the School of Communications at Temple, that being me. He said, "Man, why don't you come and read the news on my show?" And he gave me that opportunity to practice skills. Now, I was headed for photography and not so much the voice thing, so to speak, although in certain ways it's a voice of its own. But this guy kept us all proud of ourselves, and at least in the realm of music and of radio. And he just kept going. And I could tell you, everybody, you could hear the radios being tuned on Saturday night. You went into Sunday morning, didn't you? Now, did you finish? I forget.
No, but that was DAS. DAS.
No, but
was
when you were
Saturday night.
when you were on RTI,
that was Sunday night.
I'm glad you even brought that up and you even circled back to that, and one of the things in trying to wanted to close this out in a way, because I've listened to your stories back and forth. I've seen how you spoke about support. You wouldn't be where you're at because you kept naming the people before you. You kept naming the people around you. Both of you kept giving props to people around you. And there was a lot of support because everyone understood that struggle.
And if I may interject, we were growing at the same time. This was like an extension of our youth. We happened to encounter a group of people in a moment in time that experienced the same thing, but it reflected what we were all going through and the hopes that we had for our whole community.
How can we bring that back? What I would love is for you to maybe give some advice to our younger folks that are listening, even some of our older folks. How do we get back to supporting one another, right? How do we get back to that handshake you showed earlier and that hug, that genuine you mentioned earlier, like when you ran into the folks that you knew throughout the years, you said, "Man, them hugs were real." Right?
We need to stop
how do we
behaving
get back to that?
as islands.
Right.
because today people want to be an island, worry about me, my children, my kids, my brothers. No, we need to become a nation.
There is an attempt presently to intimidate us. And we
Right.
see it most vividly with these people who did all the right things to become citizens, and now they want to arrest them and get rid of them.
But that's a plan. That's a plan. That was
But
something.
this is my point. Time has come around again where they're trying to intimidate us. We need to make noise. We have to stand up against
That's right.
injustice, however it manifests itself.
And I think this generation doesn't have the cojones that we had.
Well, you know what it is? I think this generation, and this is something I think you can say about America, is we've become so comfortable
So do you
with the
mean-
good that we had that we take it for granted.
When you break down like what this generation, either even not having the cojones or the history,
wherewithal.
the history,
The wherewithal.
or the knowledge, right? Because if you knew, right, for example, sometimes when I'm driving around, I see someone, they're running and walking, and well, why are they running and walking around? Because the doctor just told them this is what's going on with your body, right?
Yeah.
And they never knew that, so they were just living life, right? But now you're concerned. So it's kind of like one of the reasons
That's what I'm saying.
for this discussion, for this stage here at the table, to hear from legends like you guys who lived it, breathed it, witnessed it. You know, you both could go on for more stories than Forrest Gump, right? Who you ran into
Where's the
in
chocolates?
these places. Yeah, but being in those places where you're like, wow, you met Dr. King, or you met this person, you met that person. You know, those stories could go on forever. But at the end of the day, we would love the viewers who are watching this show to really just know who you are and be inspired. You know, when you're talking about getting a transmitter radio with a piece of wire that goes up to your ear, right? And look where we are today. There's microphones attached to our shirts, right? These kids got iPads, right? But you were talking about a transistor radio, you know,
television that you had to put
everybody
Nine-volt
has
batteries if you were lucky.
We
That's
have
right.
cameras on our phones now, right? Because you know, I can imagine an 11-year-old you with a camera phone probably just capturing so much.
Along with what Ray said about having the cojones, is that you can't have the cojones if you're complacent.
Right.
Think about the people now. They want to act now because, for example, the Medicare that you had and have grown so accustomed to may be taken away. So now you want to act, and you're lucky if somebody wants to act, right? We have to defend what's right. We have to stand up in the face of evil and say we're here. You know, you mentioned that episode of what happened to you. Before I came to Philly, I was a little boy in New York, and I was in the public swimming pool, the pool accessible to everybody. I was maybe 7 or maybe 8
I
years
have a
old.
similar story.
And I
know
jumped
exactly
into the
what he's gonna
pool.
say.
I jump into the pool and I'm swimming
And y'all
around. I'm
jumped
thinking
up.
this is great.
And, they
And
jump
then I
out.
bumped into this little kid who was with his mother, and they happened to be white. And the woman told me to get out of the pool because I was staining the water. And to be honest with you, I didn't even really know what she meant, but I know it wasn't good. But my instinct was, this is the first time I'm in a pool. I'm not getting out.
They had a pool at 2nd and York. I lived at Pelthorpe in York. It was a free pool. I said, damn, this is great. I come from New York. You know that you don't see those kind of things. I get in there and all the people got out the pool.
I had an experience once on Aramingo and Lehigh. There was a swimming pool there, and in the neighborhood I was in, there was a couple of few white folks that were still living there, and I had some white friends. My white friend, their uncle decided to take us to the pool, and I didn't know what was going on. I was a kid, but I just know that he hurried up and got me out the pool, and we started walking away. We was like, "What's going on?" He was like, "Everybody just get in the car," and we were driving back, and it was because folks did not want me in the pool, and I didn't understand that.
In Colombia, they have the Museo de Oro, the Gold Museum. It's a building dedicated to the history of man's lust and love of gold. When they shut it down at night, the walls closed like bank doors. So I'm walking through there. I'm looking at the walls, right? Festooned with all these paintings of the conquistadores throwing the natives into lakes to fetch the gold that they threw into the lake so that they wouldn't get it. Not because they wanted the gold, meaning the natives, You know what the natives worshiped or desired more than anything? Salt. You know why? They could preserve their food with salt. They couldn't do that with gold. But the conquistadores loved gold. And if you ever go through any town in Europe, in any cathedral, festooned with the blood gold that came from South America. But they decided those people were inferior, right? So they could take their gold. And in every one of those paintings, there's a priest going, in the name of the Father, as it depicting the guys being thrown into the lake and killed and their gold being stolen. They only used the gold ceremoniously. My point is this, my long-winded point is, that's the way we've treated one another. And that's what's got to change at a cellular level. And the only way that happens is, like you said, you develop cojones and you stand up for what's right.
As we wrap this up, can you maybe give me one word a word or just a quick sentence on what would you like to see in Philadelphia? That, you know, as you sit back and with your experience in life and what you've been involved with, what you accomplished, and when you look around, and what would you like to see?
There are many things I'd like to see, but I'd like to see communities come together realizing, you know, like when that trash was piling up on the street, it was piling up for all of us. That we have so many things in common as human beings that we need to pay attention to. Because if we don't get it right soon, I personally despair quite a bit because I don't see positive outcomes in the near future. And the only way you can arrive at positive outcomes that please everybody is to make the move to come together.
Thank you for that. I want to thank you both for our first episode and the dialogue at the domino table. I am, you know, I have my poker face or domino face on because I really am feeling like a little kid here in awe sitting around both of you. You talk about diamonds in the backyard, right? I feel like I'm sitting here.
Acres of diamonds.
Acres of diamonds. And I feel like I'm here sitting on a mountain of diamonds because I'm here to hear the stories and the experience and the knowledge you both bring, not just to our community, but to this world. And I want to thank you for sharing the domino table with us, for being here. And hopefully we could get you back again. And I really would love to do an exhibit here with your artwork. I would really love to have you DJing. And I really love to do something here on a bigger level. But just want to thank you.
Let me say that I grew up in this park. And you know, I tell you on social media, brother, it's amazing what you've done with this place.
Thank you.
This place was, to me, to play Little League Baseball, and to once a year a carnival would come. And you've taken all these acres and made something out of it, man. I admire the hell out of you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As a New Yorker who was new to all of this when we were young, and this is virtually nothing but something of an industrial site. I always thought of it as, right, that was in decline. And to make it into what I saw horses in here, saw chickens, dude, and a pig. Whoa, dude.
No, it's unbelievable.
No, it's amazing because this is sort of our stump. We ran all throughout here when we were young, as young men and stuff. And to see something productive being done with it, and see, that's the spirit that we have to capture, right, but across all ethnic groups, across all racial lines, across all communities. And if we don't get serious about that, this world is doomed.
I hope you enjoyed the show as well as I did. This was amazing. And I really want to thank Mr. Luis and Mr. Ray for your time, your knowledge, your experience, your love, your advice. And I'm hoping to have you back again. So thank you again.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to release all that hot air.
Thanks for what you've done here, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Because I grew up on Erie Avenue, so this is wonderful.